I'd noticed James Gandolfini in the small parts that he played in films, but it was The Sopranos that made him a household name. I think it made him a household name in about 10 minutes of the first episode, and a household name on a channel which is not even in every household. This is the impact that he made in that first episode where we see Tony Soprano living in seeming luxury. So he's obviously made some money somewhere. Clearly he's made it through nefarious means. He's an aspirational figure in terms of the American dream, and yet he's huge. He has a panic attack in the first episode, and it happens when some ducks that are living in his swimming pool fly off. And it's the most amazing moment. In storytelling terms, it's brilliant. But Gandolfini just packs so much into what is a wordless scene. The ducks fly off. He's giggling and loving the fact that they're living in his pool. He's this simple pleasure in amongst this dark life that he leads and the terrible secrets and the death that surround him. And he sees these ducks and he's getting so much pleasure from it, and they fly off. And in this sort of second, his expression, which is like these pebbles set into this huge beach of a face, they do so much. He can rearrange these pebbles in such a way that 1 minute it's pure, simple pleasure. The next minute he's got this existential, mortal terror comes over his face, and then it manifests itself physically and he collapses. In that moment, we knew Tony Soprano and James Gandolfini was the man. We lived with Tony Soprano for 87 episodes, which is effectively living with James Gandolfini for that long. And he actually, if you look back on the early episodes, he is a big, bulky man, but he put on a lot more weight over the years. And it's almost as if, obviously in real life, Gandolfini did, but the character was carrying around all the trouble in the world on his massive frame.
James Gandolfini grew up in an Italian-American family, devoutly Roman Catholic, working class in New Jersey. So no surprise really that when he started getting interested in acting after being a bouncer in real life, that he took to playing mobsters and hitmen with ease, and he was cast in those roles regularly. In True Romance, the Tarantino scripted thriller, where he had a sort of horrible role beating up Patricia Arquette fairly notoriously, and in Get Shorty, where he also played a mobster alongside John Travolta. He very much benefited from the Tarantino effect. In retrospect, he was probably doomed, if you like, to play the hard man, the colourful mobster on the fringes in a series of high-performing feature films if The Sopranos hadn't come along.
Tony Soprano is, he's not even the main boss. He's the boss of his family, or wishes he was, but he's always wanting to be the main boss. So that makes his character more fascinating. He's not in charge, but he wants to be, and he should be, and he feels that it's his right to be. And so he's carrying around an awful lot of complicated feelings. And Gandolfini gets those across, even though he seems like an inexpressive man. He has trouble expressing himself, and so often he expresses himself only with those great ham-like fists when he's beating the hell out of somebody, because that is his way of getting across what he thinks. And yet, what makes Tony Soprano so real is not that he's just a violent gangster. You know, we've seen millions of those. It's that we'll often see him just at home, opening that huge monolithic fridge that they have in American homes, peeling off some Brisola from the greaseproof paper and slapping it on a bit of bread and eating it and drinking from those gigantic cartons of orange. That's just the man at home. That's every dad, every husband, every guy who's ever gone to the fridge to grab something just to eat it because he's hungry. So you're not just getting the mobster, you're getting the man. And it's much harder to play a man than it is to play a mobster.
The huge success, almost overnight, of The Sopranos gave Gandolfini, ironically, a huge boost in the movie world, and he almost immediately graduated to playing generals and mayors and politicians. I mean, he played the director of the CIA in Zero Dark 30. He played the mayor of New York in Taking Pelham 1, 2, 3. And I suppose most famously to British audiences, he played a general in Armando Iannucci's In the Loop, which is a sort of scabrous political satire. He also got to play sort of major dramatic roles for people like the Coen brothers. In The Man Who Wasn't There, he played this, it wasn't a gangster, but he was a very, very tough guy, store owner who has a sort of horrible death at the hands of Billy Bob Thornton. And his most recent big role, I suppose, was Killing Them Softly, where he played another hitman, sort of another very violent part, opposite Brad Pitt in the film that did very well at Cannes. He also did some other stuff that's probably less well known. He produced a couple of documentaries about the military and the psychological effects of warfare on US soldiers, also produced a TV series about Ernest Hemingway, amazingly. So he obviously identified with the sort of very tough, violent people.
The very fact that at the end we don't know whether Tony Soprano lived or died, that's the brilliance of the ending. It just cuts to black. He may or may not be about to be shot by someone we don't know. He's in a diner. So we see his face and that's it. Cuts to black, silence. So we, as viewers, can imagine that Tony Soprano never died and that he will live forever because he seemed indestructible. He survived so much and so many other people died. His body bags filling up throughout the years. Family members, compatriots, and he survives and he will endure. But it feels wrong that James Gandolfini should also not live forever. There's so much kind of mythology built into Tony Soprano's final scene, whether it's his final scene in life or just the final scene in the show. And yet, we'd rather like to think that Gandolfini could also live forever. And he will. Because if there is a kind of marbled hall, a Valhalla of TV immortals, and there should be, then it would contain Homer Simpson and the Fonz and Hawkeye Pierce and Archie Bunker and all these great characters that lived for so long on American TV and that were seen around the world. And he's definitely up there with them. And yet he was in a show that's a cable show, HBO, not seen by everybody. And yet he's up there with the kind of network immortals, the network gods, which is all down to Gandolfini.